Help support this channel and get early access to videos plus exclusive content and patrons-only live discussions by becoming a member at patreon.com/BrucePoinsett. What's up, everyone? It's Bruce, and this is the first episode of a new project that, for the time being, is going to be called the Working Artist Working Title Project, where we explore the economics of creating things with different artists in Oregon. And this first episode features singer-songwriter Isabeau Yahoo Walker, who will be performing next week at the Doug Fir Lounge with Night Heron and Love Jones, so check that out. But we talk about her story from coming from Hawaii to Portland and, emerging one as first as a teacher singing on the side to going full time and possible evolution since then. But again, also just the economics, the realities of what it takes to not just make things, but get them out there to people, how much time really goes into marketing as an independent artist. So it's a very enlightening, fascinating conversation about the world of making art, storytelling, culture, and I think you're really going to enjoy it. Check it out. Isabeau, how are you doing today? Thank you for coming on the show.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm doing well. I washed my hair yesterday, so I feel ahead of the game, even though I may not be ahead of anything.
Well, again, thank you for taking the time to talk with me today and kind of get into just the economics of being a working artist. I think it's just very important for, we talked about a little off camera as far as two people trying to kind of like figure it out on platforms like Patreon. So, I think there's a lot of value in just sometimes just sharing notes. But but you got a show coming up next week. Before we get into all that, I want to talk about the Doug Fir and be with Night Heron and Love Jones. And for those who haven't seen you live before, can you just talk about like what that experience is like?
Yeah. Well, this show will feel a lot different than maybe most of the other shows that people have probably seen me locally, because I'll be playing with a full band, which I'm very excited for. It's just not the norm for me yet. Most of my playing out live in Portland or just around has been my solo act. And I've not just my solo project, or my own project, but it's been just me, my guitar, maybe a friend or two accompanying me on guitar or vocals. It's probably just been the last couple years where I've more intentionally been building a group of people that I would consistently love to make music with. And it's costly to play with a big band, but the gains of it too, like getting to have a community with you on stage. So no matter how the show is going in the venue, the audience, if people are receptive, if they seem like they're really checked in or not, if you have a full band, not only do you get to build out the sound, but you have these friends with you that you can look around and give each other courage. So if you've seen me live before this Doug Fir show, it's most likely been solo. And I really like getting to continue playing my songs solo. For me, it's storytelling. So getting to do my storytelling independently, I have a lot more freedom. I can switch things up. I can elaborate more on one song and not on the next. I can change up a song if I feel compelled to. So there's a lot of freedom in getting to story live with people independently. But then the cost of that is I'm alone on the stage. And if things are going well, I get to kind of feel that receptiveness from the listeners and enjoy that. But if things are stale or just at the very least hard to read, you have to negotiate that on your own in real time and hopefully not be projecting to everyone that your brain is like in panic mode because you're, I don't think this is going well, or yeah. So this show, I'm very excited for, in a because I get to play it with this band, and it's not the first time we've played this configuration, so it's not really new to us. We have some familiarity, and there's more room to kind of play now that we're familiar with each other. Some of the stress has been removed, so I think I'll be able to present myself more like Isabeau, the solo artist, but with my band, versus maybe the last time I did it, which was my album release, and there was just so much on the line, or at least it felt like that. Like this was the first time we were playing these songs together in this way, and it probably took away from. I wasn't as relaxed as I had hoped to be, and that's usually where I can get if I'm alone. So yeah, I'm very excited. I'm also nervous because this means a lot to me, and anything that means a lot to me, I really want it to be good for everyone that's involved, not just me. So yeah, I'm really excited for it.
Yeah, and it's funny you talked about one storytelling, but then also the album release show.
Mm-hmm.
I was actually in the lead up to this, I was looking back on a profile they did on you in Vortex where they describe your sound as a bright gloom.
Yeah.
And it's kind of interesting just because just for background stuff, like I've been dealing with this like shoulder injury that's kind of like made me have to like modify whole yoga practice, which is to say that usually I like to like go off of, like videos and stuff, but like when you can't do certain things, you got to like improvise and then just have. So but I need like I can't do it in silence, so I need like background stuff, which is to say that I actually used that concert video, and it was like a great vibe for it. But
Right, gloom for a
yeah,
shoulder injury.
yeah. But also really enjoyed like again when you talk about like that storytelling element. We'll talk a little bit more about that later in the interview, but just kind of yeah, that ability to just you know in between songs, in between moments of just like really adding in, you know, whether it be life stories, talking about, family stories. I know during the show you talk about just like coming from a family of storytelling. I think actually, yeah, since we're here, can you just talk a little bit about how when you talk about that, yeah, coming just from a family of storytelling, how that one just like influences your music and your art, but then just like how that just shaped you, period.
Yeah. I know that I was gonna say I didn't value the storytelling, but that's not accurate. I do believe I've always valued it. Um, so I guess what I'm not finding the words to say is when something is so familiar in your upbringing, in your individual family unit, extended family, and then just like your neighborhood, your street, I feel like it's easy to start thinking that the familiar things are not special because you're like everyone does it. So it felt it was always present that there was this habit of storytelling, and but no one labeled it like storytelling. Like, oh, why don't you sit with us? Like tell stories. Like, but it happened and it felt like that's what everyone did until I left and moved to the continent for college, and you're hanging out with people from different neighborhoods, different families, different cultures, and you start realizing that some of the things that were normal or habitual, familiar to you aren't necessarily happening in the same way or at all in other spaces. So probably that was a big part of me stopping and recognizing that this way I think about songs, or this my why behind what I want to write and how I want to share it, and how I want to partner it with not necessarily full explanations of the songs, but just dialogue. It could be parallel, adjacent to it, just stitching things together that it felt really natural and important. And not that I was like really good at it, but natural in the sense that I really was like, why can't I do this? Like, this is, it tracks with me. I enjoy it myself. But I think I definitely was hesitant to call myself a storyteller initially. I think maybe I thought that that's a title reserved for like Grandma Havea or tutus or
Mm.
those who have lived a lot longer. I'm like, I can't call myself the family historian or a storyteller yet. I'm like, I gotta get some years on me before I could say that. So there's some value to that. Like I know that there's a lot that I won't be able to speak to until I get a little older. But I believe that I kind of diminished the importance and the value of storytelling because in my mind, like I haven't written a book, nothing's been published, and the way that people write stories that in my mind legitimize them as authors or storytellers. But if I sat back, I don't believe that that's the only method by which people receive like stories that impact them, shape them, bolster them, move them. And if that's not actually what I believe, then I would have to take myself seriously. And yeah, just over time became more and more comfortable um, identifying myself as a storyteller.
Mm.
Yeah, like I'm not lying on my resume. I'm not like saying I wrote this book and all these agents like wanted to read it and they published it. And like, no, this is just a distinctive way that I go about writing and sharing. It's really important to me. Why not like admit to it? Similar to when I was like, am I a musician or songwriter? Like telling people that always felt a little silly because I'm like, well, I'm just kind of making music. Like it feels weird to identify myself as a professional musician. But I think over time realizing, no, like I am putting in the work. It matters a lot to me. I'm investing myself in this. You can call yourself that, Isabeau. Like you don't have to. I don't know what I thought I had to prove before I could tote those titles at
Mm.
all, but I wouldn't hold anyone else to that. So I don't know why I was holding myself to that.
Labels can be labels can be difficult
Yeah.
because on one hand it's like it's this box, and like you said, because when I think about the word storyteller, up until maybe in these like last few years, I kind of have that similar,
Yeah. Like
kind of like person's sitting by the campfire, telling the
yes.
story, kind of
With the
like
leathered hands.
right.
Yeah.
But it's again like in more recent years, just in this writing field, it's kind of become, actually I should say more like media, because it's also a lot of like photographers, videographers, but like storytellers just kind of become the word du jour.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it's like I'm a storyteller. This is the storyteller for this evening. This is the storyteller for this project, and it's just like, okay. I mean, the
Yeah,
word may
that's true.
change,
It
but
probably will change. And I wonder if that has definitely unconsciously contributed to my feeling like I license my, well, if everyone's using it, then I should probably like, what are you doing here, Isabeau, with your zines or you're talking between stories or making videos that don't have anything to do actually with the song? And it felt nice to go, well, I'm telling a story. And they're like, really? I'm like, yeah, we'll just group it in there. And maybe it'll be easier for you to receive it. Like I don't know what to put down, like when I'm working on my CV or resume and or trying to apply for grants. They're like, what are you making? I'm like, stories. Like you're just trying to find a way to land what you're doing and imagining somewhere into some sort of language that will be compact enough that someone could go, oh, okay, I think I get that. And you're like, yeah, maybe. I don't know if I totally get it, but they're nodding their heads more. So you're like,
mhm.
good, I found something that maybe we can agree.
That's the thing though. It's like finding that strand of whatever's actually like real, label aside, what's
Yeah.
in there. So, with again, with just the whole working artist thing, like people want I want to say like a piece of you, but like they want, you know, something like actually like authentic. Like they do want your story in there no matter what you're doing to, and there's no like line or specific definition of what that looks like. but it's definitely like a part of it. Um, to that end, you talked about like coming to the mainland. Yeah, like how long have you been in Portland? But also, again, originally from Hawaii, and we were talking about this offline as far as I'm gonna struggle with pronunciations, but for the record, how do you pronounce Hawaii?
It would be, I feel like I might ask my brother to check me on this, but Hawaii or Hawaii. And the big island where is the island that my dad is from. So he's from Hilo. And the big island is also the island of Hawaii. And then the state, the island chain is Hawaii. So if you hear someone say like Maui or Oahu or Kauai, Lanai, depending on, I've heard it honestly, even back home, not just between locals, but native Hawaiians, depending on the circle, even some of those island names like Lanai and Kauai, if you take out that little Okina, which looks like an upside down flipped apostrophe, then where the islands would become Lanai or Kauai. But yeah, I am not an expert on the language, nor do I think that there is actually agreement across all speakers of like the rules of it, like
Mhm.
when can it be removed, or what was its origin, because maybe they said it like this on this island and then over time they say it like this on this island. This is not the same, but to an example of how even the variations between islands. So on the island of Ni'ihau, um, the Olelo Hawaii, or the Hawaiian language, Olelo Ni'ihau, it has like they use T's within the language, like the alphabet has T's, whereas if you look at Olelo Hawaii, the Hawaiian language, that's predominantly like throughout the rest of the islands, what's being taught in immersion schools now to bring back native speakers, there are no T's. So when you hear like I've heard native speakers from Niihau like on TikTok, and you're like, whoa, it sounds so close. It's honestly a lot more fluid, like it dances a little bit more than the native Hawaiian language that I heard growing up, or now like I've taken some language classes with some of my siblings, and it's very similar, but depending on the island and depending upon your kumu or your teacher, there could be some variations. Um, but yeah, that was a long way of saying Hawaii or Hawaii. You were so close, so close. And I understood what you were saying, so there's no part of me that was gonna be like, Bruce.
Thank you, thank you. So yeah, what was Portland your first stop in moving into yeah going into the mainland, and why
Yeah,
Portland? Out of curiosity.
I know. Um, I will probably, well, the family I came from, it sounds like they're all gone. Oh, that was rough. I knew on a practical level that I needed to go wherever I got the most scholarships. So there was that very, like I searched for places like with my peers, but I don't, and I don't feel like my parents were very, uh, I knew they believed in me and my siblings that wanted to go to school. Like that was a very big push, but also held within the confines of um, we don't have money. We don't have money. So I had a huge safety net of love from my family, which I don't know if I understood how valuable that was and is, but again, the older I've gotten, the more that I've been like this is priceless to me. But at that time, um, I knew that, or at least my goal was to get as much covered by scholarships, and where whoever paid me the most is where I was going to go. And as fast forward as a high school teacher. So when I came up here, eventually went to school, graduated, was a high school teacher. I was always amazed at the students who would like leave for school visits and college visits because I just didn't know that that happened growing up. And I think that that's very much a thing that kids from Hawaii experience because of how isolated we are, but especially being a poorer kid. The idea of going and visiting a school to like shop for them, I'm like, whoa, that's it's amazing. They're like, I'm not gonna be here Thursday and Friday because my parents and I are gonna go do like a college tour. I'm like, that's wow, that's so cool. Because I saw mine on a brochure and I applied to all these schools on the West Coast because I wanted to know that I had the ability to afford and both financially and time wise to get home. Um, and that felt like at that point it would be a big leap. It would be like 2,500 miles of a risk, but not so far that if it wasn't the right fit that I could get home. Something about just being close to the ocean felt really important. And then applied to all these schools and Warner Pacific on Mount Tabor. I they paid basically my school was covered if I went there. And the first time I visited that school was day one. And my dad brought me, and I was like, it was significantly smaller than my high school. I went to a very big public high school. And you just even things like that seem odd for my personality where I like to research and explore like what am I getting myself into? I don't know why I didn't do that in the same way. I think I just had put all my energy into preparing to leave home and making sure that I could afford this risk and probably just this unspoken fears of I'm so excited to leave, but also I'm terrified. So I think that's where my focus must have been because day one, my dad walks me into campus and we walk into the admissions counselor. And I remember their window overlooked this big field and people were playing, oh gosh, this is the first time I was introduced to this, but the
Frisbee golf,
frisbee golf or ultimate frisbee.
ultimate for golf.
Yeah, they're playing ultimate frisbee in the grassy area and I'm just watching and honestly really like excited for the follow, like what was to come, but all of a sudden the reality of, oh my gosh, I've never even like hearing students were like, yeah, I visited or I got this, or I knew these things about the school. I knew these things about this experience before I arrived here. And when I got there, that's when all that was happening for me. And I was taking in like, oh, I'm in Oregon. It's beautiful, but also I feel like such an oddball. And but I can't like live in that space where I'm like, I'm odd. Because I need to meet people because my dad's gonna leave. And I do remember that was like 15 years ago. I did not expect to be here this long, honestly. I'm really glad I am, but it was not part of my plan for sure. But when my dad left, I remember the last night, I broke down. Finally, I think all that pent up like worry and expectation. I didn't want him to think I was regretting it. I'm like, I'm not regretting this because I know it's taken a lot to make this possible for me. And I'm terrified. Like, what if somehow I just have not gauged this right and I'm not fit for this? Like, I believe I am, but what if I'm not? I don't know. Like, I don't know this place the way I thought I did. And he was just like, worst case scenario, it doesn't work out and you just come home. And I think remembering that I could go home, like, I don't know if he meant it in some really big philosophical way. He might have just been like, that's what you do. Like, if it doesn't work out, you come home. But just knowing that if I somehow failed, like, that was my greatest fear. Somehow I fail this. I don't know how I would just fail this, but if it just doesn't go well, what happens to me? He's like, well, you come home and we try again. And you're like, oh, okay. Like, failure was just so ultimate to me at that point. Like, what if I fail? Like, have I let like my mind, have I let everyone down? He's like, no. My mind, though, that felt like the case, which probably added to the anxiety of getting ready to say goodbye and be like, please just don't leave me here. but also leave me here because I think I want to do this. There's a part of me that really wants to try test myself in this, but I probably, yeah, yeah, I could keep rambling about that. But yes, Bruce, I've been here way longer than I told my friends at the airport 15 years ago when I was leaving. And I'm like, I'll see you in 4 years, 5 years, maybe max. And then a lifetime later, I'm here. I'm still here. Mm.
Oh, so I promise we're gonna get to the working artist
I
stuff.
know. I
But
am the one talking a lot, so
oh
you can edit
no,
this out.
it's all good. I'm just genuinely curious because I was gonna ask you, what were your first impressions coming to Oregon? It's just funny you said, you know, it's beautiful and ultimate frisbee. I was just like, yeah, that
Yeah.
sounds about right. Um, so did you, but just because you did mention being a social studies teacher and just in working in classrooms, I gotta ask a little bit about that before we move on. So did you did you go to school for teaching then? Was that kind of like the plan, or how'd that happen?
Yeah, it wasn't the my dad is a teacher, my mom was a teacher, my grandma Javier was a teacher. Um, my dad's also a minister back home. My grandma Jan and grandpa Jess were teachers. Like there's a lot of teachers in my family. And I don't think no one was ever like, you should just be a teacher. But I I I realized that that impacted me just being in those spaces because I got to see like some of the best and worst of what it was like to be a teacher. Um, except for my grandma Jan, all of them were public school teachers. So I was definitely in the homes where teachers would come home and be like, or talk about X, Y, or Z, or like lack
Mm-hmm.
of funding or parental relationships or administrators who were, especially in the islands, like I would imagine this is similar in smaller communities where people just like networking is king. If you know the right name, if you're from the right family, those families are still superintendents and principals and associate principals back home. So I saw that, but I also got to see what it was like for my mom stopped teaching when I was younger and moved into different work. But like my dad, I would visit his classroom and just be in there. And he worked initially with students who had got like on their way to or on their way out of Ko'olau, which is like a juvenile detention. So he worked in special ed and then with like behavioral students. And I just spent a lot of lunch times sitting on the chair behind his desk. And I think that and the stories of Grandma Havea and Grandma Jan and my mom, like it aligned with, I really wanted to be walking parallel with students, with youth. And I'm like, what a surefire way to do that. Like
Right.
go where they have to be. Like, oh, they have to be in school. Okay, I'll go into the school. So my undergrad was in history and sociology. And I, for a slight moment, was like, oh, maybe he'll like work in archives. And I did like an internship. And whereas I'm fascinated with that, it was just such isolating, lonely work and really hard for me to connect. It wasn't a direct line to my why. I'm sure I could find a way and be like, well, if I do this really well, it can impact this and blah, 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 blah. But it just didn't give me the kind of pleasure that I think would keep me vested in it. So I'm glad that I didn't do that. And I sat with my advisor my junior, senior year and was like, I know that I want to teach, but I'm also trying to give myself room to imagine other things because I was worried that I was just thinking teacher because that's what Vayaus do. They
Mm-hmm.
become like it might just I would do that. I would go, this sounds kind of secure-ish and puts me with students and not imagine that it could look like something else. But eventually I graduated, I got my undergrad in history and sociology, and then I did my master's in teaching because I'm like, I think right now I want to get into the classroom. And I'm really glad I did. It was never a backup plan. I just want to do a lot of things. So people are like, oh, did you teach so that you could afford to do music? I'm like, No, I taught because I wanted to teach. I just also really wanted to do music and was ping ponging between those worlds because one was very, very like bells, emails, phone calls, students, and the other side was like, maybe you'll get a gig,
Mm.
maybe not, maybe they'll pay you in a gift card. Like, oh my gosh. And I think coming from the background that I did, it's just not a romantic idea to be by choice. And this is fine for other people to do that. But to be a starving musician, um, I my family has been homeless. I'm like, I don't want to, if I have the ability to not be, I would like to not do that at this point if I don't have to. So having being a teacher at the same time was a gift to not just get to work with kids, but also to give me some time to figure out like how do I want to do this music thing so that I can do it in a way that I want to and believe in, and not and take care of myself in a way that my family doesn't necessarily have to come rescue me if something doesn't go well. Like I want my risks to be my risks.
Mm.
Because I was trying to take some risks where, I mean, as a creator, as an artist, like there's definitely ones where there's so much investment of time and energy and resources, and it's not necessarily like a payout, but it's going to take a lot. So I wanted to be able to do those things without always being fixated on, is it making me enough money to survive? Because yeah. Bruce, I'm so sorry. My answers are so long.
It's all good.
Like, what's your favorite color? I'm like, well, let me take you back when I was 5. When I was 5, it was yellow. Oh,
Again,
I'm a,
it's the storytelling. It's all
oh.
good. But okay, what age group were you working with? Just yeah, out of curiosity.
For the first 5 years, high school, a mix of, I think the first year was like freshman world studies.
Oh.
I know, like, but this is, you could tell I was the new social studies teacher. I was like the one new hire in the department, and the rest of
Mm.
them could have been, they're wonderful. Well, a couple of them were wonderful. They were, they would have been like my social studies teachers. Like they'd been there for a while, but they gave me all the world studies freshmen because I think they were like, oh, we don't want the freshmen. But joke's on them. I liked the freshmen, but then they gave me the senior economics. So I worked with 2 other teachers at that point who were like my mentor teachers, which I'm really glad I got to work with them. So it actually worked out that I got economics, but that is the class that when the hiring principal, I remember when he first called me, he's like, you got the job. This is your course load. When he said freshman world studies, I think he was expecting that to be the thing that maybe I like huffed and puffed about. But I
Mm.
think having what being a younger teacher at that point, there was some safety in thinking like, oh, the students are going to be on the younger end. So it gives me some time to kind of, I don't know, believe that I'm the teacher.
Mhm.
I mean, yeah, I don't like saying like fake it till you make it because I wasn't trying to fake it, but there was a degree of, I don't believe that I have all the answers, and all of a sudden you're putting me in this position where I'm supposed to, or they're going to think that that's my role. But then he was like, and then we're going to have you work with blah 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 and blah 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 with our senior economics courses. And that's the one I remember. I was back home on Maui. I'm like, oh no, I don't want to teach senior econ, not yet. Like I'm so fresh, and it was even like less about the content because I'm like, I know I know enough, and I can sit with it and feel confident about and like working us through the curriculum. It's the 18-year-olds. I'm like, these students are not much younger than me, and they probably they're intelligent, but some of them also think that they're like the wisest 50-year-olds ever.
Mhm.
And I already know that they're gonna want to poke at me and be like, who are you? And that was the case ish. My first period, first day of teaching, like as a actual hired paid teacher, was senior economics. And I remember I'm actually friends with one of the girls that was in that first class. Her name's Sandy. She lives in Portland. but she recalls that I stood by the door, and not like in a way where I was gonna be like, greetings, students. I wasn't trying to be cheesy, but I did want to be like, hey, welcome. And I stood by the door and everyone just filed past me. And I wasn't gonna be like, stop, I'm your teacher. Like that felt stupid. And I wouldn't have appreciated that. But she walked by and was like, kind of like looked at me, and she's like a little shorter, petite, and she would always carry her backpack. And she just looked up and kind of smiled and walked on. And then when the bell rang, I walked to the front. I was like, hey everyone, my name is Isabeau, and I'm the new hire here. And seeing her in the back be like, oh, and she recalled later, she's like, we all just thought you were a new student. So it's weird that you were standing by the door, like trying to greet people, like, hi, welcome, welcome. Do you have the textbook? Well, we didn't have a textbook, but yeah, that was I feel like I just didn't sleep the first few years, honestly, because I felt like I needed to be ahead, not just with the content, but be prepared for, there was just so many questions from students about everything. My life, why I wore that outfit that day. Do I hang out with other teachers? Like it was just, I think it was weird to them that that was my role, and I got it. I understood because it felt weird to me. Looking back now, I'm like, of course I was afraid. That's kind of a daunting task to kind of like pretend, play house in front of students.
Mm.
Yeah, a little uncomfortable.
I feel that. I just got done with a guest writer residency with a couple freshman classes. So, one of them first thing in the morning, and it's just like, oh yeah.
You
Like I
walk
get
into like these grown adults almost. You're like, oh my
oh,
God.
I mean, it's funny because you talk about, the senior econ students kind of thinking, they got it all figured out. Sometimes you get freshmen like that, and it's just like, I,
Yeah.
I I love them, but ooh.
I did teach at a middle school for a few years in between the high school, and that was interesting, is having a 12-year-old, a 13-year-old be like, well, I think it's more like this. And you're like, oh, interesting. Because on one hand, I've always wanted students to know that I've wanted to model like I'm learning too. I don't want to be your Yoda. I don't want you to get in that mindset because it will fail you. Like no one like holds all the answers. But I have been around a little longer. I'm I'm aging, and I've seen some things and I've read some things and I've like researched some things. So I'm trying to do it so you trust me that I can like guide you. But to have like a 12-year-old or 13-year-old, even with that posture, like, oh, like I'm open to like saying sorry, or I don't know, that's a tough one. But to be debated with about something that isn't gray, that's very much like black or white, like it's this or this. And they're like, well, I'm like, oh honey, you still look like a baby. Like you still have baby hands. Like when you're writing, I can look at their hands, like it's precious. Like don't rush it, but like you're so small and you're debating me on this. Like this is crazy. But whatever.
That's
How was
funny.
that? Was that fun? Are you done with the
Hmm.
resident?
Yeah, yeah. Just wrapped up. We actually had our end of the residency reading event last week. Time is time is relative, but yeah, no, it was good, and it's always interesting just with students because you have this feeling of, on one hand, like, are they really grasping? Are they actually, is this lesson actually hitting? And it can be hard to tell. There's always be this dance where you're like, I don't know, and then you'll get like be grading papers that night, and you'll be like, oh wow,
Yeah.
wow, wow, you were you were listening, wow. I I missed that, but yeah, so it's rewarding, and getting ready to do another one coming up this next term, so I'm excited
Awesome.
about that. And that actually brings me into a segue into this whole, we talked about the working artist angle sometime long ago, but as far as just like, if there was one thing you would say that really translates skill wise from the classroom to the stage, or just even just being like a musician in general, but specifically as far as like performing, what would that be?
Great question, Bruce. I'm gonna think before I just go, well, like have a habit of like starting there and then trying to hoping that I'll get to my thought by the time my mouth stops moving. Um I because those worlds overlapped for a long time too. Like even when I first started teaching, I was still personally writing and sharing. I did a lot of stuff online at that point because I was just so tired. I could not commit to playing out and booking the way I can do now. But I think the necessity and the practice of connecting with people has been something that's always been like either side is supported by the other practice. So being with students and yeah, I'm going through the day with them and we're working through lessons and there's grading and but there's also all the in-between stuff. Like I spent most of my lunches in my teaching career with students in my classroom or sitting in the hallways. So you just watch, you just listen. And that's probably what I miss the most. Like I'm really interested in the content area that I got endorsed in and taught, but if I had to rank them, it was more about just getting into the hallways in the classrooms. Like I just wanted to have an excuse to be there, which sounds so creepy, but I feel like I've proven myself so far, so I could say it now. But I wasn't gonna get hired and be like, I just want to get in the room. They're like, wow, that's worrisome that you don't seem passionate about your content area. I'm like, no, I am, but not more than getting to connect with these people, these students. So that just day in, day out practice of listening and relating with and remembering what it was like to be younger, uh, I know has kept me tender and soft so that when I go to my own practice of songwriting or if I'm working with my bandmates in projects that I sing in or in projects that are my own, or if I'm working with managers or booking agents or someone that shows up for the show, like I don't underestimate or try not to underestimate the value of just connecting in a real way. So whether it's, hey, you came to this Doug Fir show with a full band that I'm really proud of and I'm doing all this advertising for, or you came to this hole in the wall shop that I played a solo set at and there were like 5 people, is it's helped me remember in those like what seems like very different spaces that it's not that different. People, including myself, really hope to be seen and heard, and it can mean a lot to pause and validate. Like, hey, I'm really glad you made it. Like, it means a lot to me. Like, and you might be one of 5 people here, or you might be at a show where there were more people, or it might be a classroom and during like a lesson, or it might be at lunchtime or after school near the bus stop or something like that. So just how important it is to witness people in each place that they're at, whether they're the like an excellent student turning in their papers where you're like, oh, they were listening, or whether they're the student that doesn't turn in anything or is always late to class or is mouthing off to you in the hallway, or you're at a show where everyone seems like they showed up or no one seems like they've showed up, that there's still an opportunity to and a desire and a value to connecting with people, whether that's like in the songs that I'm trying to write or if it's just conversation on or off stage or on the side. But I really like people. Oh, actually, I should clarify that. I don't like all people. uh I hold people in high regard. Like I feel very excited and hopeful and optimistic about the potential of us people. And it keeps me, if I can stay there, it keeps me really curious and about others. And hopefully that shows up in the way I engage people. But I know that that's tempered by probably a high distrust too, because I just know that we all are flawed, myself included. So it is this dance between like, oh, look at the potential, and
Mhm.
also, ah, like
Right.
you could do so many things wrong. Yeah, people. That's very broad, but that's my connecting thing between the two worlds.
And I feel that though. I think as someone who doesn't, categorically consider himself a performer, I definitely say it just like with classrooms, one and just, you deal with different dynamics depending on where you are, whether it's class size, you know, demographics, where the school is, et cetera, what time the class is.
Yeah.
And it's just like the short answer, just kind of like dealing with, like tough crowds or, trying to get that feel for who you're in the room with and just having to develop that ability to, not take yourself so seriously. Like you have to, there's some level of vulnerability you're going to have to keep going up there in front of people. So yeah, I definitely feel that. In terms of for you, like what was the moment when you decided, okay, I can do music full time? Like was there
Yeah.
any like specific moment or specific event that kind of turned that tide for you?
Oh gosh. Once I'm because I'm as I'm answering this, I am making shifts right now in my work life that's not music. So, which I struggled with at first, just the idea of it, because it felt like a failure. It kind of reminded me of that story of leaving Maui to come to the continent for school, and my dad being like, "You just come home." And in my mind, like that's such a relief. But there's that insidious voice that's like, "But that means you failed," as if like failure was not an assumed part of all of this. Like, of course you're gonna
Mm.
fail. Like, I don't know. Anyways, I could go on a rambling thing about that. But right now, or the last like 6 months, I've been um searching for and applying for and interviewing for new positions, primarily like looking for something ideal remote. And I know that everyone's looking for that kind of thing. So I've been trying to not settle, but also not assume that I can just wait as long as I want, excuse me, um, to find the perfect job. And that unless it's perfect, I'm like, I don't know actually what's perfect. I might need to take something short term while I hold out for a better situation. I'm not sure. But when I left teaching, at that point, it was like had established enough of like savings and investment where the side job, so I was doing things that are related to music, so Patreon, playing out, playing with other bands, um, and everything attached to that. Like not like these are big money makers, but merch or any of that kind of stuff. And then was doing the Guava Jelly vintage like clothing online, and then I was doing some um, contract based work with like curriculum and SEO for different for a couple for another company, and it had woven to a point where I'm like, you know what, this is a risk, and but I can do it now as a combination of like I'm wanting to do this while I still have the energy to say yes to some of these things like touring or saying yes to travel or projects that are just not that put me on the road or whatever the case. So it's a combination of I have the energy for it, so that window will be smaller. Like 15 years from now, maybe I'm like, it's not how I want to do it. Like I just don't have it in me to travel that much or to have work that's not a regular kind of salary base. I'm like, I have the capacity to do this now. I've worked up enough financially that I can be stable and keep things like pay for my cost of living. And I'll just have to up the ante with Patreon and YouTube. So the plan at first was like, I'm just going to do those things more. And then I get out of it and realize I'm doing the guava jelly, like e-commerce, and I'm doing the contract jobs and doing music. And then just the reality of like, I knew these things, but I don't want to make YouTube videos all day. I don't want to edit, like for you editing like the in post. Whew, like I was realizing I'm tired. I'm tired of editing all these interviews and my own videos and purely to be like, oh, I'm just gonna do 4 times as many. And that's what will fill the gap. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is taking away my joy. I dread doing any of it. And so the last years, like during COVID, which has also just added to the confusion, having to rearrange, just decided that like some of the decisions I've made in the last year are, I love guava jelly, but I don't want another e-commerce job where the one that plants me here, like my inventory is here. So going home to Mali or being on the road, that's always a tricky thing. So I can't actually make money when I'm on the road. And I'm so sensitive. I hate online commentary. To have that already on YouTube and just publicly, that I'm like you mentioned, the vulnerability already. I have the bandwidth to offer that on stage and have already established it on Patreon and YouTube. But then to have opened up another road or another lane where people can be like, this jacket sucks. Like, what kind of seller are you? And you're like, I know that I should just not take it personally and go on, but I just realized I am probably a little too sensitive and spread too thin to be a really excellent e-commerce shop. And it's just not, I grew it and then I'm not loving it. So I'm tailoring that down, and then have been in this hunt to find the right remote teaching, education, student coach adjacent position for the last 6 months or so. So you got me like right in the, like I just last night submitted another application and had like my former principals as my references. So I feel better now. If had you got me 6 months ago, I'd be like, oh my gosh, is this a sign that I've completely failed? And I could keep doing it the other way, but the other way was taxing me and working against me even creating and wanting to write and record and do it, because it was that pace just didn't align with my inspiration. And it was draining me. So yeah, I launched, tried it out, still glad I launched. It was a great risk, and I'm still in that, like I'm still doing it, but now I'm deciding that what I had pieced together to help supplement it, that those pieces need to change, because they in fact weren't a perfect fit for me. Yeah, I definitely got some rejections too. So I had some bad interviews where mid-interview I'm like, I can tell you do not want me. What do you do at that point? Do you say, thanks for your time, you can stop this interview?
God, I actually just very recently had one of those for a gig that probably would have had me set for 2023, and there's just a moment where it's like, yeah, this is not connecting.
Yes.
I look forward to hearing your rejection in 2 or 3 weeks, which of course it comes. But God, when you were talking about editing, I felt that in my soul, because I have a project right now that I'm really, really late on. It's just like and I just feel it, like it's not just the project itself. It's like you said, like it affects everything else you're trying to do. It affects being able to create. And it's like, for me, it's like I like interviewing people. I like talking to people, getting these stories. I don't particularly like editing a bunch of footage, trying to cobble together all this stuff. Like the product is cool when it comes out, but it's just like it sucks your soul out. And that was one of the things I was curious about, just asking you as far as like, because it seems like you're doing a lot, and I think freelancers get this all the time. It's like, it seems like you're, because I know people say this to me all the time. It's like, it seems like
Yeah,
you're doing a lot. And
I am.
it is, but you just talk about clothing, e-commerce, like clothing, Patreon, like, you're one of the more, at least I've seen, like, you're on TikTok. It's like a very prolific, get ready with me person. But even like stuff like that, I imagine takes a bunch of time. And, just like in terms of being able to, yeah, in terms of like actually just being able to create,
Mhm.
I imagine it's just it's gotta be taxing. Like when, like how much is there a such thing as like a typical day for you?
Right now, not so much. And
Mhm.
I feel when I was about to leave teaching, I I'm glad that I knew myself enough that I knew that that freedom was what I was fighting for, but it was also the thing that was going to drive me mad because some I don't know, I don't think actually this is particular to me. I wanted to buy my time back. So moving out of teaching wasn't like, ugh, I hate students or oh, I hate this career wholly. I'm like, no, no, I just need time while I have time to try at these other things. Cause I know that as I get older, I'm like, I might not want to do them the same way, but I want to kind of do it this way now. And I have created enough of a safety net that I could take this risk now. But I knew that the regularity that had kind of felt like it trapped me was also a default check-in. Like I know things are, or at least I think things are happening and getting done. And when someone says, do you have time here? I would be like, no, I don't, because I'm working or I'm
Mhm.
at work or this project. And that first year probably would have been hard. Well, actually, it was hard, but it was a different kind of hard because COVID. We had the pandemic not been part of the story, then I would have felt this in a different way. But learning how to build my own routines and then hold to my own routines, being your own boss is such a privilege and a gift. And also, it's super challenging to be you're the one holding the line. Like, are you sticking to your routines that you know are good for your mental health, but aren't necessarily producing anything directly? Or that we talked about like that project. I always refer to it, whether it's like guava jelly or editing, it's like the dead pile. And that dead pile can get so big where it becomes this looming monster where every to-do list that I write, I all I can think about is that one thing that I've delayed on, and it interrupts my songwriting, it interrupts my prep for shows, it interrupts my desire to even want to sit down and record a YouTube video that I should do for Patreon, because in my mind I'm like, but I'm gonna have to edit that and I haven't edited that other thing. Ugh, like I I should probably ask what your question was. What was
Oh,
your question?
oh, it was just yeah, like as far as being able, like how you do, I guess this
Routines.
isn't how I asked it the first time, but just to kind of rephrase it. So it's basically like how you juggle all these different things. And like if there is, obviously you said there's no such thing as really a typical day, but like if you're spending, I mean, I'm just as someone who's not on TikTok, like how much time does it actually take to like record and like edit just a little like get ready with me clip?
Oh, 10 minutes
10
or less.
minutes. Okay.
Depends on like if I know what I'm wearing. There have been a couple times where I start and I'm like, this is not what I'm wearing out of the house. But interesting about thing about TikTok, whereas it can be a complete lifetime suck. A choice that I made at the very start of doing it that I felt was maybe stupid initially, or not stupid, or it wasn't strategic, but it was strategic for like my my well-being. I don't think I knew how much I needed something like this, but I decided to not use TikTok primarily as a music platform.
Hmm.
And peers of mine, friends of mine who got on TikTok, like the millennials were like, we need to do this for music. It I think what was communicated or is usually communicated to us, like on all the platforms that are showing up and looking like they're going to stick around, like you need to have a presence there. And so years ago, I did the YouTube. Wow, that made me sound old. Years ago, I got on YouTube and then using um, Instagram in those capacities and reels and students. Like I never figured out how to use Snapchat well for music, but as far as TikTok being like content, I'll put music like things sometimes up there, but I think what felt really important to me was a place that I could just play and that I didn't have to be Isabeau, the singer-songwriter, where if this grows, it's a marker of my music showing more potential or the reach expanding. So strategically, it probably was not the best choice at first. And I don't think it's always rewarded this way. But over time, I think what I've noticed is whereas I don't have this direct connection where people see me on TikTok and then go like, oh, her music, and then follow me to those places. But I think why it has been semi-successful, I don't even know what that means, um, is I think people can tell that I'm just genuinely playing, like I'm enjoying myself and it's not life-changing. No one is going to be, I don't know, I don't think I'm not saving anyone's life making get readies with me, but I do think in very small ways it's saving mine in not having to market my music on another platform really aggressively.
Mm.
And not aggressive like that's bad, but like I don't have a strategic plan on TikTok. It's not like I need to do this many posts and it has to be about this, this, and this. I try to let that place be like, this feels fun. I'm gonna do it. And that could have blown up in my face, or not blown up in my face. That could have just not gone well. Like maybe no one's watching, and that's fine. It still just gets to be play for me. And the only thing that's hurt is maybe my ego, thinking that more people would enjoy it than just me. But I'm I think that people have followed because of it, because it just feels very normal. Like you're just getting dressed. I'm like, yep. And they're like, do you wear this out? I'm like, yep, I do. They're like, you just wear it to your show? I'm like, I do. This is like just very, very normal. And then later they're like, oh, you make music. I'm like, I do also. And if you go to my Instagram, you might see music, but then you also might see a picture of my nephew eating noodles. They're like, that's weird. That doesn't seem like a cohesive like music page. I'm like, oh, but it is. Because that's the storyteller part. I'm like, I know it doesn't feel like a like clean aesthetic, but it is honest to what's on my mind. Like right now it's, am I going to wear this jersey? And the next day it's like, here's a picture of my nephew eating donuts. This is my inspiration for the week.
Yeah, I mean, I think that does. Oh, I'm sorry.
No. I was just like, yeah, I don't know why I'm talking so much about TikTok.
Oh, it's I think and just lightly studying marketing because it's definitely something I'm very much trying to kind of like figure out what that balance looks like and how to be more effective. But I do think that there's definitely something to, for lack of a better term, or for lack of better terms, just authenticity and you know again, kind of like we were talking about earlier, as far as giving a piece of yourself in just like an actual, again, in an authentic way. I think there's something to that that connects with people. uh to that end though, like if you just had to like estimate in terms of like percentages, like how much time you have to spend marketing versus creating, could you uh could you ballpark it?
I, I think it depends on like if I have any big project or something coming out. So if had you checked in with me last spring, it was heavy on the marketing. Um, and some of that was like I had already created this body of work. And now the goal is like, can I get people to sit with it and listen to it? So I think last spring it would have been like, oh my gosh, like 70-30, like how much
Mm.
time was spent in communications with venues and bandmates and coordinating rehearsals and payment and press releases and all that stuff. Like it was so much that, which can, like, I maybe to kind of go back to what you had mentioned earlier with, or asked earlier about TikTok. What I don't want to come across is I'm like, I don't know, I just throw stuff up there and like it's just
Mm.
successful. Like, no. Like I'm trying. I'm definitely trying. Like I am not, there's no pretending that I also am strategizing and trying to make sure that whatever I'm creating has its best shot in front of as many people as possible who could value it. And because of that, like I do I am trying and I am strategizing. The TikTok is like this anomaly where I'm like, I am trying, but I'm just gonna use this as an outlet for
Mm.
my own. And if it connects with people in an authentic way, then cool. And if not, I'm gonna try to reserve this spot as a place where I can just dump and not be afraid to, which I think indirectly helps me in the long run. But right now, as far as the breakdown of marketing versus creating, it feels like, I was gonna say like 50-50, but maybe like 60-40, 60 creating, because I'm trying to build back a routine of just writing and not writing for, oh, it's got to be a song. Like my phone, it's voice memos is, I have so many of just things that I'm trying to practice as I write and play, just to document it and then to not try not to put pressure on myself that this needs to be finished soon so that I can record it and it can go up on YouTube. And not that there's a rhythm for that too, where I want to learn how to ship things and not be afraid of it not being perfect, but also just this practice of writing. So I've recently built that back in, and in preparations for the show coming up and shows coming up in the spring, there's the personal time taken that I've been taking to prepare for those things. But because I'm not playing out every night and I don't have rehearsals every day, and I might try to write a little bit every day, but I'm not necessarily finishing a song. I think most of the time there's this pressure, and maybe some of it's really fair and good and some of it is not, to kind of tell the world via like websites, social media, like I'm still here. I got something coming up. Like I think there's that feeling like, how do I stay relevant? Like even though I know in my ideal world and in my metrics, just because you're not on the social media radar, it doesn't mean that your work is irrelevant or unimportant or not real. Those are not true indicators. But I also know that in the realm of like oversaturation, our attention is being pulled every which way. My attention is being pulled every which way. There you are trying to figure like, how do I try to keep some attention on what I'm working on so that people don't get so distracted that when I do have something, that I am no longer a part of their algorithm and it just never gets in front of them. So I definitely feel that strain. And sometimes it feels kind of manic where like, can I just pause and then come back when I'm ready? Or will that cost me more if I decide to do like a smaller percentage of marketing and strategizing? But yeah, I think right now 60-40, maybe in the next like few days is going to feel like 50-50 because that show's coming up and
Mm.
got like new merch, and I'm hoping that the shows in the spring before I leave for other things can do well. And yeah, that's a fair question. That's I think I feel like I'm torn between what ideally how I want to behave versus what I feel like the market demands of me. And I definitely feel like the market demands that I stay on the radar often or all the time.
Mhm. Yeah, that I mean, even that word relevant is, for lack of better terms, relevant. Like, I mean, I just think about up and like I don't watch the Grammys, but you know, obviously it's hard not to know
Yeah,
what happened
see,
if you're
yeah, yeah,
on any
yeah.
kind of like online. And I think about like, I don't know, before Kendrick dropped the album last year, people like, he's been off for 5 years and is he still, you know, relevant? It's like, when did we stop talking about Kendrick Lamar? I
Yeah.
missed this point, you know? I don't think that's the case, but also we're online, we're in social media, and hyperbole is very is very strong. It's very
Yes.
strong. But even when you talk about that percentages, it just reminds me of a conversation I was having with another local artist where she was just talking about how, yeah, most of the days is me and my business partner in the studio thinking about ways to crack this algorithm. And I'm like, that is one fascinating, but also two, this is not, I don't want to say this is shade to them. It's just like, it's also, but it's also just kind of like, at least for me, I'm just like, God, that's depressing as far as just
Yeah.
like the state of, again, the state of trying to be a creator in this and like how much of that time is really spent trying to navigate this landscape. I'm trying to figure out what is gonna, like you said, like you said, like the the market demands that I basically all the time screaming, I'm still here. I'm
Yeah.
still here.
Don't forget me. Please don't forget me.
Yeah.
I have no new album out. Like people are like, what are you working on? Like lots of stuff. Just not nothing deliver not a deliverable. So I feel that
That's another one of those words.
deliverable.
Deliverable.
Yeah, I feel like I keep saying I'm often just dancing between what it could look like, and I have not found like a perfect balance between this. So that's frustrating in and of itself because it feels like I'm like, oh, I got it, and swing too far. I'm like, oh my gosh, come back. And I wish that it wasn't this. Maybe one day I'll find this sweet uh, in between, but of recognizing, okay, here it's kind of relevant to me across the board, not even just in creating, but like here's the world as it exists right now. These are the systems at play. Um, how do I function as best as possible in what exists right now? Because I know realistically, me just not liking doesn't it doesn't change. It's not like I post something profound on Instagram and they're like, you know what? You're right. Isabeau, no, no, you're so right. Let's change it. Like, I know that individually, I'm not unimportant, but it's not gonna shift overnight. So there's like this survival mode of this probably was like growing up too, was like, I don't like as things exist, but as we go, as we try to change things, I also know that I I want to have choices. Like I want to be able to navigate this as best as possible. And I feel like what I'm swinging between is like I want to know the strategies so that I can utilize them, so that I can offer them to other people and be like, hey, here are some hacks. So you don't have to expend a lot of energy doing X, Y, or Z. Like here are some pointers. Here's some bullet points. Like these are the cliff notes. Try these because I know the main goal is you just want to get to the get to the creating and doing it in a way that you believe in, that is full of integrity and joy and pleasure. Like, I want you to get to those things. So here are the hacks. So on that one side, I'm like, I value learning about the marketing. There's a lot more that I need to know. I feel like I sometimes hear it and then I just let it go out the other ear. Like I want to be strategic. I want to be a learner and a listener of what's happening, what like the people need and want. And like you were saying with this past interview that you had, to spend too much time there, it so distances you from your own conviction about why you're doing what you're doing. And not that every song I write is profound, like that they could be playful, but that spirit that says like I want to do this and I'm going to show up and I'm going to mean it in whatever capacity, it gets really leaky when you're spending so much time and energy trying to think about the algorithm, because you start second guessing some of those things that if you did them they would connect with people because people would believe you. And I think that the market is smart, and people, including us, like, we know when something feels real.
Mhm.
We're like drawn to it, and sometimes we can't even put language to it. So the more time you spend trying to learn the strategy, which I think we all could benefit from to navigate it, if you don't break free of it soon enough, you could second guess yourself out of creating anything that matters to you, even. Or I like, there's times where I'm like, I don't want to write, or I don't want to perform, or I'm so nervous about this show tanking, because if it does, it means this, and it means this about me, and it means this for the band, and like if I don't make enough money, or if I don't get enough people in the building, like all metrics that are fair, because I'm like, I want to like make them money so that I can make money so that I can pay these artists so that we can do this again and keep doing this. But if I get so fixated on that, I'll work my way off that stage, and I won't show up and say the things that I meant to say out of a place of like, hey, it's just good to be here. Thanks for being here. Because I'll be thinking like, I don't deserve to be here. This is embarrassing. I've already failed. There's only this many amount of people, which means this about you know what I mean?
Mhm.
You just get so stuck, and I have not found a sweet spot, but I feel like I am getting faster. My reaction time is shortening to get myself back. So if I'm spending a lot of time here, I'll be like, wait a minute, why won't you post that thing? I'm like, oh, well, it seems silly. Like, what if it doesn't get a lot of views or likes? Or what if someone that I got pitched for touring looks at it and it doesn't look, I don't know, business or music professional enough to have a video of me eating dry min noodles with my nephew Kahiao. And in my mind, I'm like, oh, then they're not the people I want to travel with. Like, if that is what breaks it, then I mean, that's such a that what a loss, but also that's such an inherent part of like
Mhm.
what makes me me. Like, that's just the beginning, you guys. Like, you can't handle the noodle video. I'm like, oh no, like wait till you see everything else that I'm preparing to make or post. So I'm just getting faster. The reaction time is getting better. I have not found a perfect balance, but I'm faster to be like, don't do that. Or, hey, Isabeau, you need to try at this. Like, give yourself a shot. You can be strategic and still be an artist. Like, both can exist. But I don't know. Have you found a perfect balance that you can offer to me some
Uh,
counsel?
if only.
If only, yeah, write a book.
I mean, that actually did. I think it's a nice segue to. I want to ask you again, as a fellow, and you brought it up for as fellow Patreon creator, because I feel like that's definitely a space
Oh,
where, you know, I know I'm in that mental space of just thinking, is this, am I doing this right? What's working? You know,
mhm.
kind of to your point about, thinking too much about the algorithm and second guessing ideas. And I'm curious as far as like how you would evaluate your experience. How long have you had a Patreon out of curiosity?
I think, how long has Patreon been around?
I feel like at least a decade now. Cause like when I first heard about it, it was like YouTube creators I followed,
Mhm.
and it was one of those things where, I was just just the skeptic
Mhm,
thinking,
mhm.
I wonder, this is an interesting concept. I wonder how long this will last. And then I think I launched mine in, I want to say 2020, but it was one of those things where I looked at some of those people who I was like, oh, this is interesting. I wonder if it lasts. And then, you check in on how are they doing on Patreon? You're like, whoa.
Yeah, yeah.
It was like one of those bubble things. So yeah, but yeah, how long
You're
have you been on?
probably, I've been on it. Okay, let me disclaimer this, because this was like, maybe I was about to say this was an insecurity, but maybe because it still is. I've been on it for a long time. And in my mind, it would make sense to me why someone would be like, wow, you've been on it since this point. I expect you to be this big of a like like people would expect that I'd be doing a lot better
Mm.
or making more on Patreon because of how early I came in. I think I've been on for like 9 years
Wow.
because I had a YouTube comment, and he eventually became a patron, but his name is Robert. I'll give Robert a shout out because he was the one that pointed me that direction. But he had been following my YouTube channel for a while, and he's like, "Hey, have you ever heard of Patreon?" And at that point, I was also a skeptic. Where I'm like, "Is this just another?" Like you're always trying to stay open to what could be helpful, but I'm not wanting to spread myself too thin and try out everything
Mm.
and direct my listeners like come to Patreon. Then a year later, it's gone. You're like, "Wow, that sucks that I made this huge effort." But I did some research and it was early on enough where I'm like, this is pretty low risk. A lot of artists that I was following on YouTube had also started, but they also, I think what felt demoralizing at first is they brought over huge YouTube followings. And at that point, I don't even remember what size I was when I started my Patreon. So I was very excited to do it, but then immediately looked around, was like, I'm glad I'm in good company. Like, this is good that there are artists and creators here who are doing well, because that bodes well for Patreon. I'm like, cool. Because I want Patreon to do well, because now I am on that ship. But I did not have the kind of membership subscribers that like one artist, she was a singer-songwriter from the Bay Area, Kina Granis, and she blew up because her song got used at like a for a Doritos commercial
Mm.
for the Super Bowl. I can't remember what Super Bowl it was, but she was huge. Like I was and am a fan of her, especially at that point. And when she was like, I'm gonna start a Patreon too, immediately her following moved over from YouTube to Patreon. And at first it was demoralizing because that wasn't the case for me. But then with the help of loved ones like reminding me like, hey, that's a good sign that people are willing to hop over, even though Patreon kind of sounds like a cult. Like at that point, everyone's like, is this a cult? This is funny, it's weird. What does it even entail? And you're like, I just like the fact that anyone could just choose at any tier of, or price to come in on it. I liked that it wasn't like a sneak attack financial charge. I didn't want to feel like I was tricking anyone into supporting me. But I have been on there for a long time and I don't even know how to like rank myself. I would consider myself still a small Patreon creator, but as I'm saying this, I think the highest value of it to me is it's been consistent. Like even though it's small, it's been a group of people who, even as people come and go, new people, they get their welcome tea and a perk, and then the next month I'm like, bye. That was that was rough, but they are a crew of supporters that even though it's not been enough necessarily to wholesale fund my music career, it's done so much for my morale to know that there is a group of people who don't necessarily even have direct contact with me that somewhere in their processes decided, I believe you. And I'm coming in at $1 or I'm coming in at 5 for video or 10. And some of them have been around from the very start and ask for all the like are really quick to ask for all the Patreon perks that I offer, which is awesome because I want to offer them. And then some who I don't know have ever responded to any post or message or haven't inquired about any perks. And it's odd, but the idea that someone would just be like, oh no, I just believe you, do your thing, and I'm going to set aside a small amount for you to do your thing, like that's felt worth it. It's like why I've stuck with it, because it's been really over the years I've had to adapt what kind of perks I've offered, because some of them they just weren't sustainable and it felt like it took more out of me than I was being rewarded with. I do like Patreon chats, and when I did those in the beginning, that classroom, like you mentioned, that vulnerability in front of a class, I would open up this, like we used to do Google Meets and now we do Zoom, but during Google Meets, you have all these faces pop up and everyone's a stranger to each other. except to me, but I don't know them well. And it was so interesting. So I would get kind of anxious before each one, and then at the end of each one, I'd be like, "Wow, that's kind of cool! Like, well, what a crazy world that this works out." But before each one, I'll get nervous again. Like, how do I host this when they all know a lot more about me than I know about them, and I don't know who they're going to be? And what if this guy picks a fight with this person or says something? Like, how do I moderate this? Like, I don't not really wanting to moderate it, so I'm small, Bruce. I'm still small, and I every once in a while I'm like, is this worth it? But for me, it has been like a small financial support. But the biggest thing is just their presence has felt like my version of a label. Like my friends who have labels and have that kind of those people in their corner with whether they're releasing a project or a show or whatever the case, or new merch or writing, my Patreon community has been my version of a label. But I don't know. I have a lot of friends too who have started Patreons in the last 4 to 5 years who aren't doing it anymore. Because it just they didn't feel like it was worth what they were putting into it. And I get that. I think had I started recently, it would probably be a lot more frustrating.
Yeah, I mean, I've it's interesting we talk about like the people who like don't respond to like the messages or not really looking for the perks, but I think that was the thing that really, at least for me anyway, kind of yeah, just made it like you said, like it can feel difficult, but like it's not so much the money as it is that consistent support, that
Mhm.
consistent just that consistent endorsement where having people say like, look, I just like you said, like I believe in you. I
Mhm.
I I'll throw out a little bit like, you know, $1, $3, $5 here
Mhm.
a month because I support you. And it's like, huh, that can work. Cause I've definitely had that similar experience as far as like with perks and doing certain things where I'm like, yeah, is this sustainable? Is this, you know, speaking to what, you know, because especially like if people are supporting you, but they're like, hey, I'm supporting you. They're not gonna be like, you know, I don't know, your on-call focus group.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
like, no, this is my support. I believe in you.
Mhm.
But I mean, even like I'm curious as far as like with doing the chats, like is that like a monthly thing? And is it like as far as like how you set up, is it just like a free for all, like Q&A or
Yeah. It uh, probably like yours and a lot of other Patreon creators. So I just saw my hair and there I was like, wow, Isabeau. Um, that's not gonna help. Um, it has evolved. So in the beginning, like I did the patron chats and it was supposed to be more like Q&A. But eventually I was like, you all know so much about me. Like, what more could you ask? And it felt odd to just sit there and field questions, especially when people had less questions or they were just unsure. Like they're popping into this thing and they're kind of looking around and looking at the people on the screen and they might not be sure if they want to say anything. And at one point, like, yeah, so it was a monthly thing initially. I was still teaching and it became so I don't think I would have said this then, but now looking back, I'm like, I had so much anxiety over wanting to host them well, but I didn't want them. I tried out like a really structured version, but then I ran out of things to say about my own stuff because I'm posting about like my creative processes or behind the scenes. So they're getting so much to get to those chats and then talk more about myself felt tired. It's like this is weird. So then I would try to create structures of talking with others, but not everyone. Some people wanted to talk a lot, and then I was unsure of how to stop them or interject. And then others who were very, very shy and just wanted to join but didn't really want to chat. Like one woman for a long time, she's no longer a patron, but her name was Betty. She lives in China. but she would turn it on because of the hours during work, and she would just keep her phone, and we would watch her type, and once in a while she'd check in and like thumbs up. So you have like Betty level of engagement, and then I won't mention his name, but another man who would typically, whenever given an opportunity, would start almost treating it like a therapy group and would like share a lot of personal stuff.
Ooh.
And then you would have another person over here who, like, it's exactly what I should have expected. Like their only commonality at that point that we knew of was me. So all of them are just coming in thinking that we're just going to talk story. And that created so much anxiety in me that I didn't know how to host it well. Like I wanted everyone to feel comfortable, but there wasn't really a norm around what it was. So I went from once a month, then I tried to do it quarterly, but then got feedback like, hey, we liked the regularity of it also helped us remember to do it. We do it quarterly and like no one would show up. And I'd just be sitting there waiting like an open house, parent teacher conferences, and no one showing up. And part of me was pleased because I was like, oh, great. I'm nervous. But then you're like, oh, this is not great because this is what I want to foster something within this group. And then I moved to Discord for a while because I saw other Patreon creators doing that, and Patreon created some sort of collaboration with Discord. And it was just chat. And that did not seem to vibe well with the group. They're like, what? I think because we had done video chat, to go from that to Discord felt like a weird downshift. So tried that for a couple months. And then during COVID, that first year, I went to a weekly one, especially when we were in lockdown, which I'm not doing weekly anymore, phased out of that. But at that point, it was such a specific group of people who would show up for it regularly. Most people don't, which is, I'm like, it's open for everyone. Try to explain it over again every time I post a link. I'm like, this is what it is. This is how you can participate if you want. Feel free to stop in, even if you have work and you can have your video off, just say hi in the chat. Just love knowing where you're tuning in from. But even with all that, there's usually like the same, there's like a roster of 10 people who would always show up in one way or another. So during COVID, we went to once a week. And that became like such a, I think that was the initial goal. That felt like a little community. And one of them, he flew out for my release show. Another one, she's based out of like Orcas Island, and she's actually from Kauai, but lives up there. And then she came down for the release show, and I got to visit another one when I was on tour with Ilabamba in LA. And it basically, I finally felt like that groove established a familiarity where I'm like, this is what I mean for the patron chats. And I can better explain it now to like new people, like, this is what it is. This is the culture of this chat. And if that sounds exciting to you, join it. If that sounds horrible, avoid it. Like, you don't have to do these. But it's taken a long time. That's like 9 years worth of, well, maybe not 9 years when we figured it out, but a lot of trial and error, a lot of chats where I'm sure people left and went like, what was that? Like, I don't want to go, I don't want to go back to that. Like, but I've like since then, two of the gentlemen who used to participate in the chats very regularly have since, like, it's been close enough now. They Lorenzo passed away. He was in Greece and he passed away a year and a half ago. And I had someone email me from his account. That was, even though I've never met Lorenzo, I've been chatting with Lorenzo for nearly a decade. And then Chuck, who I got to visit last spring, when I was the one I had mentioned when we were on tour with Ilabamba, he passed away right before I went on that tour on my own. I was really hoping to get back to his neighborhood and be like, look, a decade's worth of you like supporting me on YouTube and Patreon. And I got my shit together, but Chuck, and I'm in your neighborhood playing music live. And I had been reaching out to him, and then finally Google searched him and realized that he had passed, which is super, not super, that's not what it is. It was it felt odd to grieve in such a real way people that I had not actually had in-person relationship with, but I think that speaks to like I meant to just build a little like online family, and Chuck was one of them. And I was really hoping, I could think I really want for my Patreon community who stuck with me, I really, similar to how I feel about my own family, a big part of why I want to do this well is I want them to, I want it to be a reward for them too, to be like you said, like you believed in me and you endorsed me, and you weren't wrong. Like I want to be like, thank you, like you weren't wrong about it. I didn't just take your endorsement and be like, cool. That's great. I'm like, no, I meant to repay you in some way by following through with this. I just didn't get it to Chuck fast enough. So I gotta stick to it. Can't delay.
Well, yeah, I mean that just when you talk about this idea of, I think, and that's one of the things that kind of that's when I've looked at, Patreons that kind of like really, at least when I went into it, like what I was hoping for was when I'm, shooting for one day, it's just like, yeah, that like online family experience, like that kind of like online community. Whereas it's not just like, hey, I make content, you consume it. It's kind of like that, but like an actual interaction. Then it's also kind of like you talk about, like adjusting expectations at a certain point. Like I'm a person I really followed getting into it was Kim Foster, does this page for Harriet, and this similar case of taking like a huge YouTube following and then kind of like transferring it to Patreon.
Wow. You're doing
Yeah,
so well.
yeah. But then like also looking at just like some of the things like some of those like YouTube chats, hangouts, or like what she was able to do with that. But it's also with, I don't know, even when I'm like crunching some of the numbers, it'd be like, oh, there's this many thousand followers. And then if I look at, here's how many people are in the actual chat. And it's like very much significant, but it's a very small fraction of that. So when I look at my own thing, like, okay, let me put this in perspective. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, it didn't work out the way I was supposed to, but also if I've been doing the math on this and just the percentages, like, yeah, that's,
You're like, it's a win. It's a win.
yeah.
Like do the comparison. Yeah.
But kind of to another point, because you actually just gave me I'm not sure if you realized it, but just a very helpful consultation there on my own Patreon woes. So I do appreciate that. But the other thing, you mentioned Ela Bumba, and I think I want to talk with you about like collaboration and networking. And I feel like you kind of like spoke to a little bit earlier when you were talking about just going to Warren Pacific and feeling like, feeling like the oddball in Portland. It's like I have to meet people. And
Yeah.
I feel like Portland's also, at least it's a good space to be a quote unquote oddball, I will say.
Yeah.
But in terms of just like, yeah, what one just like networking collaboration is meant to you as, again, as like an artist and kind of like, establishing yourself out here. Can you just talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. I'm trying to think of where to, is there anywhere, anything you want me to start with in particular, or just overall how I went about trying to pick and choose who and with whom and how I collaborated with
Yeah,
people? Just
yeah,
more
like what,
particularly.
well, one, like how you go about picking and choosing, but then also like what does it mean as far as like, again, just like creating opportunities and whether it be like direct opportunities, like obviously like being in with playing with different bands, but then also if there's stuff that's, you know, I'll use like an example for myself. So with like the Patreon following, for example, I have people who support me on there, but then just working in their respective fields, they might come across things where it's like, oh, I might want to like connect Bruce to this person because this, you know, I see something there. So
Yeah.
there's like directly and indirectly, you know, creating opportunities just through networking and meeting people out here.
Yeah.
That makes more sense.
Well, totally. Um, I think it at the start, it was just I said yes a lot. And I don't believe I was doing that just carelessly without thought. When I was first starting out, like playing out more music wise, or just making it known that like I'm oh, my phone is buzzing and I don't want it to do that. Spam. Um, so I said yes a lot, especially as I was learning the city and learning people. I wasn't really sure what was out there. So I didn't feel like I had this perspective where I could go to a particular corner and say like this. I know you're doing things that I love and admire, and I want to find a way to just be in company with you. So it was just a lot of um creating my own things first. Like when I was playing out, I would build my own shows, like especially when I was teaching and I didn't have the time or resources or know how to spend a lot of time trying to get on bills with specific artists. I would just everywhere I was at, I'm like, could music happen here? Or could we do some sort of project here? And I'm glad I did that because I feel like it helped hone, like I know what it would take to build something from the ground up. I'm hoping that I didn't want to necessarily hold all those roles forever. Like I wanted to work with other people. I wanted to be booked for projects and not have to be the creator of the project because I didn't know if it existed elsewhere. So I said yes a lot, built my own shows and bills and projects. And especially when I was teaching, it was trying to find community within the education world between people who are also artists in some capacity. And just because like another teacher or staff member was an artist didn't necessarily mean that we connected really well.
Mhm.
But just helping me expand my idea of what kind of projects I was allowed to be a part of, because music was what I spent most of my time and energy on. Had like this past summer when I worked with Sophia and Kapu at Portland State to put on that installation, a younger version of me would have been like, I have no business being there, because I would have been like, my lane is this lane. But the longer I've spent saying yes to projects and just working with other people who are kind of in the education world, but also working on sets and working on like art and styling and music and gallery settings, it helped expand like, oh, I just kind of want to be in company with people who are making things, but also with purpose. Like if they're doing it because they want to work with kids or specific communities, like I can I agree with all parts of that. So even if it's not music, it's okay. I don't need to be the musician front and center. Like I can set up tables for students to do like an art project day. Like I think as long as it can connect to my why, I can say yes to those things as long as I have the energy and the time for it. So I know I'm getting far away from what you're asking. My networking has probably been first and foremost, can I connect with this person or this group with their why? And even if it's not my specific lane of art or creating, I would like to be a part of supporting or being in company with what they're working on. Because even if it's not my specialty, maybe I never am useful in that project, but I believe in it. So it'd kind of be like me becoming a patron. So I'm like, I want to be in your corner, because I might not have the skill set for this or the time to even specialize, even if I was interested in it, but you do. And that's exciting. Can I be in your atmosphere? So I just have been trying to get in the atmosphere of people who um and not just artists, but people who, I don't know, I believe them, because I'm like, is even if we don't end up creating together some sort of like musical project, I know I'm gonna be glad that I created something with you. And I don't think I'm just a musician. Like, I don't think that that's all I can give my time and energy to. That's such a vague way of saying, how do I network? Were you wanting more specifics? Like, do you go to singer-songwriter circles, or I probably find that less intimidating, even though that's so big and open-ended, because like you could say yes to anything. To me, that's less intimidating than going to, like, recently my friend, my peer Sam, she was a part of starting up like a singer-songwriter kind of coalition, and there's opportunities for open mics and just a lot more support around, or valuing this the songwriter, which wasn't around when I was starting. And I'm like, that's exciting. But something about going to those very concentrated networking moments is so much more intimidating to me than showing up at like the open mic and just listening and being like, to other people share their writing and their art, not speaking myself and going like, this is beautiful, well done, and then leaving, and just getting to witness people doing their thing like that. Even though that's like kind of nerve-wracking to put yourself in new places that people don't know you, to me that's less scary than going to like, this is a singer-songwriter networking session. Like, I think I kind of glaze over a little bit when I'm going to something that's specialized. I don't know if that makes sense, but
Yeah, yeah. I'm curious, as far as like any, whether it be like collaborators or mentors or people you've kind of, come into your circle, especially since coming to Portland, is there anyone, I guess, that comes to mind specifically who you like to name, just as far as like being really, um, yeah, influential on your growth, on your process?
probably two people in different ways. Um, my friend Luz, she, in our friendship, but also just as an example, like her being the leader of the band, getting to witness her, and then in our own personal conversations hear encouragement to like, just make the thing that you meant to make. And when you're getting in your head second guessing, like, well, my story doesn't seem to be like the story that is being consumed and digested, like, what if, I mean, I believe in it, but what if no one wants it? Like, what's the use? That I think her modeling and what we've talked about in our friendship has been like, you make it, you just make it and try it out, just go for it. So that encouragement and that example is always like ringing in the back of my head, just make it. And it really aligns with this feeling of like, those moments where I'm worried, like, well, what if there isn't a lane or a market for what I'm writing or talking about? Like, I can't force people to like it. I don't want people to be forced to enjoy it or want it. Is this like question of like, but what if they just haven't had that yet? Like, you might need to remind them or give them a chance to be like, maybe this is something that I want or need. And then I would say, as far as in my process, Ryan, my friend Ryan Oxford, who also plays in Ila Bamba, and I met him through Ila Bamba and Luz. But I got to work with him on the EP that was released right as COVID presented itself, and then the full length album that I released this past summer. And I think what Ryan modeled for me or offered me in that process was someone who listened well enough to know that I was trying to find language to guide the production of the song. So I didn't want them to get so far away from me that if I played them independently, when I played them solo, that someone would be like, oh, that's not Isabeau. Because I'd had that experience where very talented people worked on the songs and they sounded cool, but they just weren't me. And I didn't believe them either. I'm like, oh, this is tough. Like I don't want to insult someone else's skill, but it doesn't feel like me. And I need it to be me if I'm going to be presenting it. So he found a way in our dynamic, and it's gotten better over time as I've become more fluent in how to communicate what I'm hoping for or wanting. So he respects it, and he's also helped me be more ambitious with my experimentation. Be like, well, what about this? And I don't have to fret anymore because of who he is as a person, that the what about this is, can you just change it altogether? Can you just not be you? Because that's what I had felt like in the past. Like, here's a suggestion. Can you not be you? And then it would be great. And you're like, okay, like that's sad. Like I just need to not be me, and then maybe I'd be more marketable. But for Ryan and our friendship and how that's evolved in this working dynamic, I feel better communicating. I think he's felt better at communicating. Like, let's honor what you've brought. It's good. It's good. Bottom line. And now, how can we expand it in a way that still is authentic and honors you? And I've needed that because sometimes you can't hear it sometimes beyond what you know of it, and you need someone else to kind of stretch and bend things and be like, what about if it was like this? And you're like, oh yes. Like I needed that. I needed someone who I didn't think was trying to change me to help change the song. So losing Ryan, I would say.
Okay, okay. And you mentioned front yard parking real clean earlier, and I was curious as far as like you are someone who kind of like incorporates other art into your work, whether it be like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, making zines to go with songs and things like that. But can you just talk a little bit about as far as your background and beyond just making music in terms of just making art?
Um, I I think with zines, that came from like a community of friends just over time putting like language to feelings and ethics that I had consciously and unconsciously built growing up. So back home on Maui, when I was growing up, the music scene was very homogenous. Is that the word I'm looking for? Like, like it was a very weird thing for me to perform at the talent shows with my guitar, and it not be like a local style, like um, reggae or like just local beats. And it wasn't, I'm not, no one was booing me, no one was mean, but it was kind of like, oh, just gonna sing your songs. It's kind of like I would get called a hippie often. I remember I went on a trip once with my basketball team, and they were like, yeah, you because you have like long hair and you carry and you have a guitar. And I was like, oh, that's what qualifies me as a hippie. I'm like, well, I didn't know that was that was the standard. But what I didn't know that there were communities of kids, let's say like the punk world, for example. The punk before I'm guessing it was like very mainstream and popular and marketable, but more the ethic of we say what we mean, we bring people on the fringes in, like more of like that practice. That's what myself and my younger brother, who's like 2 years younger than me, um, I think we were trying to search for that on Maui, and not because the traditional Hawaiian music or the local style beats were not like they've definitely shaped me and are in me and influenced me, and more as I become more comfortable in my identity, I want to restitch those things back into it. But at that point, the things I wanted to like sing and play, or just the things that were on my mind, there wasn't really a scene. Like when people talk, oh, this scene, or they're up in like Tacoma, or like we had no idea that there were like these communities of people that supported these different music scenes, but that were backed by like a specific ethic. He just tried to find the people. I think that's why it's always going to be very people centered. I'm like, just got to find the people and they might dress different than me, or their music might be a little harder than the music that I am making. But when you strip it down, like what they're talking about and who's included and why they play shows in the spots that they play shows in, um, and why they don't play in other spots, like those things started to really resonate with me. So the zines, hearing about how simultaneously on the continent that there were like underground shows going on and people with messages about identity and race and culture and family and politics, and they're building it into these crafty little zines, and sometimes it's really creative in how they're formed, and sometimes it's just a pamphlet and it's lyric sheets and like the words matter, and they would just give them out for free at all age events. I'm like, that's so it I was like, I didn't realize that that was going on in places where there was this high value of the word, and it wasn't just about playing the right venue with the right band. It was about like making sure all the kids got to be there, the kids being like actual kids and the adults. So I think the zine world started with me just like in my songwriting and note taking, and then having someone as I became an adult living here going, oh, that reminds me of what my buddies would do, um, with like lyric sheets and zines that they would hand out at shows or on the street and just give them away. Just be like, I'd love you to have this. I'm like, oh, that's cool. I want to do that. And then going, I know what I want to share because I have these notebooks where I've just been storing all the stuff that wasn't translating into song, and storing these things that didn't seem to fit a musical setting. But I'm like, I don't know where they go, but I mean to share them, but I don't know where they go. And then someone kind of gives you a format and goes, well, how about like this? I'm like, perfect. That's exactly what I want. I just want it out. I just want to give it away. And then with like the installation, I definitely didn't feel like, I know I'm not a formally trained artist who typically would be invited into a space like that. And I'm really grateful that Sophia, at Lipman White was like, well, that's what we're looking for. I'm like, oh, good. Because that's me. But that belief of like, that doesn't mean that your story and that the mediums that you use are not legitimately pieces of art. So I'm really grateful for all the people along the way who have really challenged the fears and insecurities in my head that art had to look a specific way, and certain lanes were for specific types of artists with a very particular training. And even if I felt like that was like, didn't totally agree with it, that I just had no business challenging it. But that installation felt like a great invitation to be. I didn't feel like I was storming my way into the castle. They welcomed me, so I felt like it was a very safe place for me to show up, invited, and just do it. Tell the stories in the way that I can. And if someone's like, well, this doesn't seem like a typical art installation, to be like, I know, but they invited me and said I could do it how it feels like I want to do it. And that can still, that is good. Like, I don't need to keep disclaiming, like, I'm not an artist. I'm not an artist. Like, stop with that. If some man carved a bowl and put it in the middle of a gallery and it's beautiful, and he came from the right pedigree and education and schooling and background, and they put a glass case on it and they're like, that's art, and people come and see it and they're like, oh, it's amazing. Why can't this also be art? This method of sharing, I don't even know how to describe what I did there. Life-size dioramas, vignettes, which is like a very life-size, not very life-size. It was a life-size game of imagination, which is how I feel like I've survived in the world. I'm constantly playing imagination. That was very long, Bruce. Thank you for asking me that question and your patience through me trying to get to some sort of point.
Yeah. To that point, Isabeau, I want to thank you again for your time and generosity of time and insights and stories. And before I let you guys, want to ask one more question to like to take us out of, kind of exploring your journey, but just in general, I like to ask people, what is something in the what's called the wide world of art? It could be, international, national, it could be very local, it could be the show on TV. But like what's a project in the art world that you are not involved in right now that's exciting you?
Oh gosh. I could tell I was really thinking because I was picking at my nail polish. I'm like,
I got a stumper there. I'm
yes.
just kidding.
Will you go first so I can listen to you and maybe it can jog my memory? Because right now my brain just went, ah, because there's everything.
what what's something what is exciting me right now? This question just turned on me. Uh,
I am genuinely.
let's see. Um, it's not. I wouldn't call it new, or I guess you'd say like the last year, but found myself listening to Lupe Fiasco's most recent album, Drill Music in Zion, just like way too many times. Again, as someone who doesn't watch or pay attention to the Grammys, I guess I shouldn't be overly concerned about things that don't get nominated for Grammys, but that just kind of it was weird that that didn't get recognition to me. But anyways, yeah, it's just I don't know, I love there's something about being able to you talked about, you know, being someone who just like really likes people earlier. I feel like I'm very much someone like I love people, but I don't always like people. I often don't like people.
Yeah.
And I I gravitate towards engaging grouches sometimes. I feel like
I
Lupe does that well.
yes.
So
You say engaging grouches?
yeah,
Yes.
yeah. But so yeah, I feel just like that last album, and I swear that song. Only when I'm actually asked the question do I forget things. But a song
I'm the
on
one that
phone, yeah, he had the song on Phone where he just his first verse just rappers die too much. That's it. That's the verse, and then just lets the
mm,
instrumental ride out for the whole thing. And I'm just like, this is, it sounds kind of corny, but like, this is what I love about art. This,
yeah,
but
yeah.
like it really is. So if you want to do something more recent though, if you're still thinking,
Yeah.
what was
My
it
brain.
PPS just started this documentary series with Chuck D on the history of hip hop. It's like fight the power and hip hop's influence on the world. I just started that last night and thought it was pretty good. I love the interviews and also just made me. I'm always thinking about from like a perspective on Portland. It's just like, if someone put out the funding for the right, like the proper on camera talent and obviously the crew behind it, a Portland hip hop documentary could win so many awards. But anyways, yeah, that's
The, these are two things that is it like things that you're stoked on, excited about, and or is it like you would want to be working on that?
well, I feel like on the Lupe end, like I used to do more like music coverage for a
Mhm.
while and go in studios and things. I realized like I love this, but also you don't want my input. This is not my area to help contribute. But a documentary level, definitely. Um, but yeah, as far as like the excitement level, it's just like these are things that just like I just find myself like randomly, you know, like 1 in the morning, just laying in bed, like thinking stuff I think about.
Yeah.
It's like I think about this song. I think about music from like 20 years ago, like a lot. And like not even like big stuff either. I saw today that like Get Rich or Die Trying just had its like 20th anniversary. It's like, wow, that's wild. But no, I think about like people's albums that no one remembers all the time.
Just on
Listen
your
to Ma-
mind.
I listened to Mace's second album a lot. Like it's not like I wear like a badge of honor, just like, oh, this thing that you were not thinking about, but like that's really,
What's on your
yeah.
mind?
Yeah. So
Man,
I guess in a very broad way, that's how I describe what I'm setting up for you.
I'm like no closer to I don't know if I have the specificity of what you're talking about, but two things came to mind. One, I think it was a misunderstanding of the question, but I'll still share it because it's where my mind spent most of the time before I realized I don't think I'm actually answering the question. I think I thought that you were asking, is there like a lane of work or is there something, are there projects going on that you don't have direct contact to that if you had the opportunity to be a part of, you'd want to do? And um, I don't have any like specific project currently other than the first thing that popped to mind is, and I don't have the skill set for this too, that's why this is totally not answering the question. Um, Dance. I would just want, I wish I could do the storytelling through dance. I'm just gonna leave that there because that was not the answer to the question, but that's where my mind went. So I'm just honoring the fact that my misunderstanding uh did create some sort of answer in my brain, just not the right one. And then something that's on a project that would be on my mind that more is, I'm just piggybacking off of the documentary you were, like the hypothetical one that could happen in Portland, is something that's always on my mind is I want to find ways uh to document and share the storylines of back home. And I know that I've consistently been trying to find ways to do it within my skill set. So I mean, I document stuff all the time back home, sound bites, audio, videos, interview questions. I mean, they were a huge part of front yard parking, but almost like I'm just keeping this treasure trove of material because I want to find a really a way of telling the story, not just through my family, but the street, specifically Mohalu Street. Um, and that's something that is like constantly on my mind is how to tell that story. I'm totally not answering your question, but that's what was on my mind. Watch, I'll think of a response to your actual question before I fall asleep, and I'll be like, that's what it actually meant. That's all I had right now. I'm so sorry.
It's all good. It's all good. Again, I really appreciate your generosity with the time today and yeah, insights, stories. Again, like just you just talking about your Patreon experience actually really did make me feel a lot better about how things are going. So, you know, again, I appreciate that. And yeah, thank you again.
Thank you for your patience. I was not working off of concise bullet points, so really appreciate you listening.
It's all about, yeah, it's all about the conversation, the story. Technically, I want to tell the students about, doing interviews. Your job is better to have the person get people to talk, get people to share things. So I appreciate it. I really do. This isn't a, you know, late night with Seth Meyers, and I need like a sharp 8 minutes. So
Like no music is gonna start playing.
no,
Like
no.
hear me out, like, and you're done. No more.
But yeah, before we wrap it, is there anything else you'd like for anyone watching to know or take with them? Any other notes about your upcoming show, upcoming projects that people should know about?
I mean, that show, I'm being very forthright and I'm very excited about it. There's this nagging voice in my mind sometimes that thinks that I should temper my excitement, be a little bit like not be so forward with how much this means to me. But I think that that just wouldn't be honest to the degree of like how much I'm trying to do this well and do it my way. So I'm very excited about this Dougford show. I'm really grateful to get to do it with a full band. It's just a it's not like a better than when I'm solo. It's just a different thing. And I know that there'll be like some patrons in the audience, and then there'll be people with some friends, and hopefully just newbies that are willing to like stick around for my set. So I guess if people are local, um, it's not the only show, but not but it's not the only show, and I would be really grateful if people turned out for it and gave it a shot. Um, I don't have any upcoming releases or projects of songs. There's some collaborations with uh, other kinds of artists that I'll be doing in the spring, and then hopefully doing some on the road with Ilabamba. But right now, I kind of in like planning mode to see how I can set up my music stuff for the like later part of the year. So maybe I guess it's a request of even if you don't see me releasing stuff right now, I'm still here. I'm still Isabeau, still an artist. I just also have and many other things that I have to tend to in my life so that I can exist here in this kind of way as an artist. But that's it. That's it. Don't forget me. That's such an easier way of saying bye. Hi, bye. Don't forget me. So,
It's a good callback though. Yeah, Isabeau Vayau Walker. Thank you again for the time.
yeah, thank you for having me.